Oysters. Casanova ate 50 oysters for breakfast every morning, not because he was hungry. The 18th century Venetian wrote extensively about his seduction methods, and oysters appeared in almost every account. He credited them as essential to his romantic pursuits, which says more about Casanova than it does about oysters, but the association predates him by centuries. Ancient Greeks tied oysters to Aphrodite, the goddess of love, who, according to mythology, rose from the sea on a shell. Medieval European aristocrats served them at feasts, specifically to signal romantic intent. The food carried so much erotic reputation that ordering oysters was considered a statement. The science behind the reputation comes down to zinc. Oysters contain more zinc per serving than any other food, and zinc plays a documented role in testosterone production. Low zinc levels correlate with reduced libido in clinical studies. That part is real. What nobody mentions is that zinc deficiency takes weeks to correct, and eating one plate of oysters at dinner does nothing measurable to hormone levels by the time the check arrives. Every Valentine's Day, restaurants mark up oyster platters by 30 to 40%, and couples who have never touched a raw oyster in their lives order a dozen because the menu described them as sensual. A significant number of those people spend the next 10 minutes trying not to visibly gag. Honey. The word honeymoon exists because centuries ago, Vikings decided the secret to a successful marriage was a month of fermented honey alcohol. They weren't entirely wrong. Norse tradition held that newlyweds should drink mead, fermented honey wine, every day for a full lunar cycle after the wedding. The belief was that honey's sweetness would ensure fertility, and that a month of steady consumption would produce a son. The word honeymoon comes directly from this practice. Egyptian physicians prescribed honey for sexual stamina thousands of years earlier, and Hippocrates recommended it for vigor. The Kama Sutra and the Perfumed Garden both reference honey as essential to romantic preparation. Across completely unconnected civilizations, honey kept showing up in the same context. The modern nutritional argument centers on boron, a trace mineral found in honey that some researchers have linked to estrogen and testosterone regulation. Honey also contains nitric oxide metabolites, which play a role in blood vessel dilation. Both claims are technically grounded in real biochemistry. Both are also enormous stretches when applied to the amount of honey anyone would reasonably consume in a sitting. What honey actually provides is a quick hit of glucose, pure energy that feels revitalizing, especially in an era when most people were malnourished. Ancient cultures noticed that eating honey made them feel more alive, and they credited that feeling to desire rather than calories. Thousands of years later, people still associate that sweetness with romance. Chocolate. Aztec emperors drank chocolate before visiting their wives. Europeans found out, called it an aphrodisiac, and have been using that logic to justify Valentine's Day ever since. Montezuma reportedly consumed large quantities of a bitter cacao drink before entering his harem, a detail Spanish conquistadors recorded and enthusiastically repeated back in Europe. The drink bore no resemblance to modern chocolate. It was unsweetened, spiced with chili, and consumed at room temperature. But Europeans heard emperor, women, and cacao in the same sentence and drew their own conclusions. By the 1600s, chocolate houses across Europe marketed cacao as a tool of seduction, and the Catholic Church debated whether it should be banned during fasting because of its supposed carnal effects. The compound most often cited is phenylethylamine, a molecule the brain produces during feelings of attraction. Chocolate contains trace amounts. The problem is that phenylethylamine from food gets metabolized so rapidly in the digestive system that virtually none reaches the brain intact. Chocolate also triggers a mild serotonin and endorphin release, which improves mood, but so does a brisk walk, and nobody gives the gift of running shoes on February 14th. Chocolate became the default romantic gift because centuries of European literature said it should be. Whether or not it works chemically as an aphrodisiac is irrelevant. The taste is the actual seduction. Strawberries. There is no chemical in a strawberry that affects human desire. Cultures across 4 continents decided it was a sex symbol anyway. The association starts with appearance. Strawberries are red, heart-adjacent in shape, and covered in visible seeds, a combination that ancient cultures translated as fertility made visible. Roman mythology linked them to Venus. Medieval stonemasons carved strawberries into church altars and cathedral pillars as symbols of perfection and temptation, which is a strange decorating choice for a church, but an effective one for building a reputation. The psychology behind this is well documented. Red is the color most consistently associated with arousal across cultures, and foods that visually resemble anything related to reproduction tend to acquire erotic reputations, whether they deserve them or not. Strawberries checked every visual box without containing a single relevant compound. The modern pairing of strawberries with chocolate created a romantic gesture that neither food is actually worthy of. Nonetheless, dipping a red fruit into melted chocolate and feeding it to someone became a Valentine's Day ritual. Strawberries are proof that when it comes to aphrodisiacs, looking the part matters more than actually being it. Watermelon. In 2008, scientists discovered watermelon contains a compound that relaxes blood vessels the same way Viagra does. They clarified that you'd need to eat about 6 pounds for it to have that effect. Nobody ran that headline. The compound is citrulline, an amino acid that converts to arginine in the body, which then triggers nitric oxide production. Nitric oxide relaxes blood vessels and improves circulation, the same basic mechanism behind erectile dysfunction medication. Researchers at Texas A&M published the finding, and within 48 hours, Nature's Viagra was trending on health blogs and morning news segments worldwide. The retraction came almost immediately. The amount of citrulline in watermelon flesh is far too low to produce any noticeable vascular effect. Reaching a therapeutic dose would require eating multiple pounds in a single sitting, which creates its own set of problems, none of them romantic. Researchers also pointed out that most of the citrulline concentrates in the rind, the white part between the flesh and the skin that almost nobody eats. So, the most effective way to use watermelon as an aphrodisiac would involve gnawing on the part people throw away, which is not a move that has historically led to second dates. Chili peppers. Of every food on this list, chili peppers are the only one that actually does something noticeable to your body. It's just not what anyone was hoping for. Capsaicin, the compound responsible for the burning sensation in hot peppers, triggers a genuine physiological chain reaction. Heart rate increases, blood vessels dilate, skin flushes, breathing quickens, endorphins release. The body, in measurable terms, enters a state that overlaps significantly with sexual arousal. The difference is that one of those states involves attraction and the other involves regretting your appetizer. Cultures across South America, South Asia, and East Asia have associated spicy food with virility for centuries, and the reasoning makes intuitive sense. Eating something that makes your face hot, your pulse pound, and your body sweat feels like something is happening. And something is happening. It just has more to do with a pain response than desire. Capsaicin activates the same receptors that respond to actual burning, and the body reacts accordingly. The endorphin release is a coping mechanism, not foreplay. The gap between what capsaicin does and what people want it to do is where the aphrodisiac reputation resides. Chili peppers create a convincing physiological imitation of arousal, and for most of human history, nobody knew the actual difference. Pomegranate. Cleopatra had a lot of options. She reportedly chose pomegranates. That's either a profound statement about ancient aphrodisiacs or a very specific dietary preference. The pomegranate appears in fertility mythology across nearly every Mediterranean and Middle Eastern culture. Greek myth ties it to Persephone's descent into the underworld. She ate pomegranate seeds and was bound to Hades forever, a story that links the fruit to desire, temptation, and consequences. Persian tradition associated pomegranates with invincibility and abundance. The Song of Solomon references them alongside imagery that religious scholars have spent centuries trying to explain as metaphorical. The visual argument is hard to dismiss. Crack open a pomegranate, and hundreds of jewel-colored seeds spill out, each one bursting with juice. Ancient cultures saw abundance, fertility, and life packed inside a single fruit, and the symbolism wrote itself. Modern nutritional claims point to antioxidants and potential effects on blood flow, but no clinical study has established a direct link between pomegranate consumption and libido. What pomegranates do have is ritual. Eating one requires effort. Cracking it open, picking through the membrane, staining your fingers. The experience demands attention in a way that peeling a banana never will. Avocado. The Aztecs named the avocado after a testicle. Spanish priests were so alarmed by this that they tried to ban it. The avocado survived. The Nahuatl word is ahuacatl, and it translates directly. Avocado trees bear fruit in pairs, hanging low on the branch in a way that made the naming of it almost unavoidable. Aztec culture associated the fruit with fertility and reportedly restricted virgins from leaving the house during harvest season. When Spanish colonists encountered avocados in the 16th century, clergy members were disturbed enough by the sexual reputation to discourage consumption among their congregations. The fruit's popularity outlasted their objections by several centuries. There is no compound in an avocado that has any demonstrated effect on sexual function. Nutritionally, avocados provide healthy fats, potassium, and B vitamins, useful for general health, irrelevant to arousal. What avocados have always had going for them is texture. The soft, creamy flesh and the way it yields when ripe contributed to a sensual reputation that began with a name and never needed science to sustain it. The entire aphrodisiac legacy of the avocado traces back to the fact that it hangs from a tree in a suggestive way. Sometimes a reputation is built on nothing more than an unfortunate resemblance. Kinda makes you wonder why the banana never made the list. Figs. Figs were considered one of the most erotic foods in the ancient world. Cut one open, and you'll understand why without anyone having to explain it. The interior of a fig is dense with seeds, pink, and structurally evocative in a way that made ancient civilizations blush and modern food photographers very careful about their lighting. Greek and Roman cultures treated figs as sacred fertility symbols. Dionysus, the god of wine and ecstasy, wore fig leaves and carried the fruit as an emblem. Ancient Greek fertility rites involved figs prominently, and Cleopatra reportedly favored them, though Cleopatra reportedly favored a lot of things, so the endorsement carries diminishing weight with each new food it gets attached to. Nutritionally, figs contain amino acids that some researchers have linked to stamina, along with potassium, magnesium, and iron. The evidence connecting any of those nutrients to sexual function at the doses present in a fig is thin enough to see through. What figs have is visual persuasion operating at a level that made scientific arguments unnecessary for thousands of years. The fig's reputation was built the moment someone split one open in front of an audience. The seeds, the color, the interior structure, the fruit made its own case. Caviar. Caviar has never been scientifically proven to do anything to your libido. It's on every romantic dinner menu anyway. There's a reason for that, and it has nothing to do with how it tastes. Caviar is salt-cured fish eggs, harvested primarily from sturgeon, and it has been associated with wealth and power since the Persian Empire. Russian czars served it at banquets as a display of imperial excess. French aristocrats adopted it as a signifier of refined taste. The food's erotic reputation has never been based on what it contains. It has always been based on what it costs. A tin of high-grade beluga caviar can run over $200 an ounce, and the implicit message of ordering it on a date is that money is not a concern. There is no nutrient, mineral, or compound in caviar that has been linked to sexual arousal in any peer-reviewed study. It contains omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin B12, and selenium. Perfectly respectable nutritional content that does absolutely nothing to justify its presence on a seduction menu. Caviar is on that menu because it is expensive, rare, and associated with people who had the means to be publicly romantic without worrying about the bill. Every aphrodisiac on this list works through some combination of mythology, appearance, or physiological coincidence. Caviar skips all of that and operates on the oldest aphrodisiac mechanism of them all, the unmistakable suggestion that the person across the table is willing to spend a truly unreasonable amount of money on you. Reality is, none of these foods actually work as an aphrodisiac according to science, but belief is its own kind of chemistry. Don't forget to subscribe so we can ruin something else you thought was true.